Hey babies. I just called y'all babies. Hey angels, I hope you've been well, and I'm really sorry I haven't done an eating disorder video in ages. I wanted to do a video called Every Single Eating Disorder Ever, because I've seen videos talking about the lesser known eating disorders, but there's so many. Estimated that there's around 19, although some of them aren't official diagnoses. Real people suffer with these debilitating mental illnesses, so I'm going to try and be as, respectful as possible. Even if they have silly names or they sound ridiculous, they're real illnesses and they ruin lives and they have detrimental health repercussions. Quick disclaimer, I pride myself on never putting triggering content out on my YouTube channel, but I'm just going to put a trigger warning here anyway, because I'm just going to be discussing eating disorder behaviours are of each condition, so trigger warning for eating disorder behaviours. The purpose of this video is for me to show how unglamorous eating disorders are, and they're first and foremost a mental illness, not a physical illness, not a diet, not a trend. They make your mind very erratic. They can destroy brain health and brain function and bodily function. All of them are life-threatening. The disclaimer's almost over. I just want to quickly also say, don't self-diagnose, even if you relate to them. Definitely talk to a mental health professional. I'm not a mental health professional. It is possible to experience different symptoms from different disorders. On to the first one, which is definitely not the most common: anorexia nervosa. Now, I got diagnosed with this when I was, I think, 17, but I know I was struggling with my eating disorder for way longer. It all started when I was 12, I think, maybe 13. Why is anorexia the most talked about and the most well-known when it's basically the least common? I'm not going to talk about it very much because I make loads of videos on eating disorders like anorexia. Y'all know what it is, but I just want to quickly put out there that there is so many misconceptions about this eating disorder. One being you have to be underweight to have it, that only white girls, white teenagers get it, which is definitely not true. You can be an old woman, you can be of any gender or race to have anorexia. You can't think of anything else beside food. It takes up 90% of your brain's space. That's all you can think about. You literally want to disappear. You feel like you're floating in this world. You're severely depressed. A lot of times you're suicidal, bare anxiety, you feel like you're never good enough. It's very, very lonely and isolating. You use it as a way to, feel like you're in control of something, but in reality you're very out of control and the disorder is controlling you. You can be very angry as well. I've done a video on how eating disorders can turn you into a bitch, and you feel like you have to lie and hide things from your family, and this creates a disconnect and you isolate yourself from your friends. So like I said before, it's very isolating and just a lonely, ugly disorder. Things that might happen to your body: you'll become physically undeveloped, particularly if your anorexia starts before puberty. You feel weak, feel cold all the time, you feel dizzy, you can lose your periods, your hair can thin and fall out. My dog's popping off. Your bones become fragile, and you might develop problems like osteoporosis. You might find it hard to concentrate. That's just some of the issues and complications that come with anorexia. Diabulimia is a type of bulimia which occurs when someone has type 1 diabetes. They will not take their insulin as a way to lose weight, and it's very rapid and extremely dangerous, like they all are, but it's very dangerous. People have only come to realise what it is recently. Consequences of diabulimia are very serious and can send you into diabetic ketoacidosis, which can be fatal. If you don't give yourself enough insulin when you have type 1 diabetes, your sugar levels won't come down, and it's just a very hard cycle to break. But you can get the right help and support and recover from diabulimia. Bulimia, life-threatening. With bulimia, a person will have frequent episodes of binge eating, and it's followed by purging through either vomiting or taking laxatives. Also, you can purge by exercise addiction as well. What might happen to your body: you can be a healthy weight and appear healthy and have the most damaged body ever, and no one would ever notice. You will be severely dehydrated, which can cause really bad skin, and you can lose your menstruation cycle. When you make yourself sick, the acid can really harm your teeth. There's a YouTuber who talks about her bulimia recovery called Educating Shani, and she has to wear dentures even though she's only like 30 years old because her teeth had all fallen out from her bulimia. This is actually common with bulimia, and not only can your teeth fall out, you can get really bad sore throats. And if you use laxatives like I did in the past, which is horrible, it's a horrible thing to go through, it's like an addiction, you can develop irritable bowel syndrome and a stretched colon and constipation and heart disease. So nothing glamorous about bulimia. People just like to think of it as a diet and a phase, and it's so much more than that. It's a severe mental illness and it's just horrible. BED, which stands for binge eating disorder, is the next one. It's where a person frequently consumes large amounts of food and they will overeat, binge at night time in secret, or just do it in secret because they feel guilty. If you experience binge eating disorder, you might rely on food to make you feel better, to hide difficult feelings and emotions, even if that's subconsciously. Not everyone with binge eating disorder is overweight. You might develop serious health problems such as diabetes, high blood pressure, or joint and muscle pain. You might experience breathlessness, you might feel sick a lot of the time, experiencing sugar highs and lows, which means you have bursts of energy and then feeling very tired, and mood swings, acid reflux, and irritable bowel syndrome. That's binge eating disorder, which is very common. I'm wearing one contact lens. You know that model who lied about having the David Bowie eyes and got exposed for it? I feel like her. The next one is avoidant/restrictive food intake disorder, also known as AFRID. It's not connected to body image issues. I'm not saying everyone with anorexia has body image issues because that's a myth. Anxiety around eating itself, and it's more about fear of the smell, the taste, or the texture. And so they might just be seen as being a picky eater, when in reality it's like an actual fear. As you can imagine, very dangerous. So yeah, that's AFRID. This one sounds very ridiculous. It's not a diagnosable disorder. Anorexia, which sounds so weird, but triggered by society standards. What I think it is like teenagers who love pro-ana blogs. That's kind of what I see it as. It's just people who want to have anorexia because they see it as glamorous in their eyes, which is awful. Of course I feel empathy for these lost souls in the world who want to have this severe eating disorder, but it's not a choice. It's not something you choose to have. Sorry, I just realised my switch is in the background. It's not something you can just pick up. It's not a diet, it's not a trend. Anorexia should never be something you want to have. Anorexia is kind of dumb sounding. It's triggered by society standards, which is not a real cause for an eating disorder, but I guess it is a cause for this body image issue type pro-ana illness. It's a weird one. I have empathy for these teenagers who want to have anorexia, but it's never something you should want. Like I said earlier, I was listing all the horrible side effects. I put them up again just for the pro-anas who think it's so glamorous. Ooh, Cassie from Skins. The next one is anorexia athletica. So it's basically an exercise addiction alongside anorexia. So a lot of them will not only restrict but burn off their daily intake by extreme addiction, leading them to, you can develop osteoporosis, muscle issues, you feel constantly exhausted, fainting is not uncommon. The next one is another one that sounds absolutely ridiculous. I'm not judging, but it does. Gourmand syndrome, which kind of sounds like gourmet, which is funny because it's for people who are often hungry for fine dining, and people only experience this when they have a stroke, which is extremely rare. This is the rarest eating disorder. Again, I'm not sure this is a real diagnosable disorder, but I found it online. Gorman syndrome. The next one has a silly name as well, but again, it's a real disorder and it's not a joke. It's something, you know, that kills people. Drunkorexia. I'm really sorry that you can hear my laptop buzzing. But yeah, drunkorexia is someone who starves themselves throughout the day and then later binges on food and alcohol. It's the behavioural pattern of starving yourself and then binge drinking and binge eating. So the condition is a combination of an eating disorder and binge drinking that can lead to serious health issues. It's related to, you know, like unhealthy eating and drinking patterns, which, as you can imagine, is severely dangerous and just damaging, and liver problems, stomach problems, all the problems that are associated with anorexia and alcoholism combined is just obviously very dangerous. Another one with a ridiculous name is pregorexia. And I think they should change the names to all of these disorders because they sound so silly, but they're so scary and dangerous. So pregorexia is someone who is pregnant. They might not want to be, they might be severely depressed, and they will still restrict their intake like a person with anorexia. But they, you know, despite the fact they know they're pregnant and it might harm the fetus as well as the woman. The fact that this happens is so scary. It's like they can't handle the fact that their body's changing, and they will take the risk of potentially killing their unborn child to starve themselves. So it's a really dark one. It's like, I think the darkest one there is, to be honest. I love true crime, so I was like watching a true crime video about this teenager, and she was pregnant and she didn't want to be, but she was past the date where it was legal to get an abortion. So she had an eating disorder, so she would starve herself and try her hardest to end the pregnancy that way. And she actually gave birth by herself to a stillborn, and she ended up burying that child in her garden. And like, it's such a dark case. She ended up going to court but not getting any charges, I don't think. It's crazy. The fact that this is a real condition is so scary. So that's pregorexia. I learned a lot through this one. I didn't know it was a thing. The next one is muscle dysmorphia, with a very silly nickname as bigorexia. Like, honestly, who made up these names? Like, so it's seen as reverse anorexia, bigorexia, which is more common in men, and so they're trying to bulk up and gain weight, but these patients feel like they're never muscular enough. It's a body image issue kinda, and they get really big and bulky and they never think it's enough, so they just, you know, keep working at it. I'm not quite sure what the health problems are with this. You know, it might be like a possible steroid addiction, and there can be problems with eating too much protein, which can cause cancer. Body dysmorphic disorder is not an eating disorder, but kind of a related condition. Body dysmorphia involves an individual's inability to stop thinking about a perceived flaw in their appearance. It doesn't have to be thinking you're bigger than you actually are. It could be that, but sometimes I read a case on this girl who believed she looked like a Down syndrome man, and like, that's literally what she saw. Like, it's a disorder but not an eating disorder, but for some reason people get the two mixed up. Busting a myth here, it's actually very, very rare to have an eating disorder and have body dysmorphia at the same time, and a lot of people think that they go hand in hand, but that isn't really the case. The next one is eating disorder NOS, not otherwise specified. That's kind of what I used to know it as, because back in the day it was called EDN-NOS, but now it's called offset. It just means that you have an eating disorder that doesn't meet the criteria for a diagnosis of either anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating disorder. So it just means you don't fit into a current diagnostic criteria, and you might experience all of the behaviours, all of those feelings and body changes associated with other eating disorders. You're not any less valid to have ED-NOS. Like, it's still so dangerous. People will even say it's like one of the most dangerous, because you can otherwise appear healthy, or like you're a healthy weight or whatever, and your insides are just struggling so much because it's still a severe eating disorder. The next one is night eating syndrome, which is a condition that affects like roughly 1.5% of the population in the United States. It could be up to 5% as well. A person will consume most of their daily intake after dinner. The next one is orthorexia, which like thankfully has become more, I was going to say prevalent, no, that's not a good thing. There's been more awareness about it recently. So orthorexia is actually fairly common, and it's a disorder which people avoid unhealthy food to the extent that it's unhealthy. So they might be fixated on nutritional value of the foods, and they could eat that to the point where they don't care about taste and they lose all enjoyment to food, and it's a control thing. Their whole life is consumed with healthy eating, when in reality that's very unhealthy because it's a mental illness. Orthorexia is very serious. I think I've had like a bout of it in my life. A lot of people's fitness careers are literally fueled by their undiagnosed eating disorder, when I think a lot of them have orthorexia, which is interesting. And a lot of people think they're like health gurus and they can have millions of followers and, you know, have their fitness and nutrition accounts, but in reality it's just an eating disorder in disguise. I thought it was pronounced pica, but I think it's pica. So it basically means consuming non-nutritional substances, and some of those substances can include a physical like craving, like ice. Ice is a very common one, especially if you have low iron, but it can also be sand, dirt, chalk, metal, clay, hair, like in rare cases feces, which is horrible, like disgusting. It can be fatal, and most people that suffer with this are children. And Charlie Kelly from Always Sunny. Now, I said I wasn't going to make jokes, it's not funny. A lot of people with like an iron deficiency have pica. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this one. I think it's Prader-Willi syndrome. It's a complex genetic disorder which typically causes low muscle tone, mainly cognitive disabilities, behavioural problems as well, chronic feelings of hunger which can lead to excessive eating and very life-threatening. I've seen a YouTube video on someone with this disorder where they literally constantly are hungry, like constantly, and they like have to eat constantly. So it's different to binge eating disorder because it's literally constant, and it's a cognitive disability where they just need it, you know. And the parents of these people who with this syndrome really struggle with them because they can often get angry when they don't have food. The next one is rumination, which basically means chewing and spitting out food, which I didn't know was its own disorder. I thought that was a behaviour that some people with like restrictive eating disorders just picked up. But basically it means people repeatedly chew and spit up food, sometimes even chew it once more and then spit it out or again or swallow it again. It's like a chewing and spitting disorder. You can develop acid reflux, and especially if you're not digesting anything, so many bodily issues would come along with rumination. The last one is called nocturnal sleep-related eating disorder. I feel like this is a relatively new disorder, and it kind of relates to night eating disorder. It's characterised by a lack of appetite in the morning and overeating at night, and it's related with insomnia, and it's been reported in a new study that like an eating disorder but also a mood and sleep disorder at the same time. The person has no appetite for breakfast, delays the first meal for several hours after waking up, and isn't hungry or is upset about how much they ate the night before. The person feels intense, anxious, upset and guilty whilst eating. It's thought to be as stress related, oftentimes accompanied by depression. I think some of them could be renamed like pregorexia, bigorexia, wanorexia, like I don't know, like I feel like the names distract from the severity of these illnesses. Very complex mental illnesses first and foremost. So not a choice, they're not a diet, they're not a phase, they're a mental illness and they should be treated as such. And you don't have to look a certain way to have an eating disorder, because eating disorders don't have a look. Like I said just now, they're a mental illness, not a body type. This was every single eating disorder ever, but a lot of them are new. So there could be more. If I've missed one out or something, let me know. You can always comment your opinions on anything I've said. Thank you for watching. I learned a lot whilst doing this video. There was a couple I didn't know existed, so